Welcome to Guitar Time. I'm Robert Knoll. We're continuing with scales. We want to do the dominant 7 scale. Now, I call it dominant 7, but the dominant 7 is also what we would refer to as a minor 7. But I think most people say dominant 7 scale. So we're going to talk about this, but you should have the PDF and have the pattern. What we want to compare it to is our major scale. It's very much like the major scale. So learning the Form 2 dominant 7 scale, quite often students get mixed up between the major and the dominant because we're only actually changing one note difference. Let's talk about it, okay? So, as we started with our major scale and you went the same formula starting with 1, 2, half step between 3, 4, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we go to the perfect fifth, the 5. And then we go to 6 major. Here's the difference. Instead of us going a whole step to the major 7, we go to the minor 7, or what we're going to call the dominant 7. So now we are going to have a half step between 6 and 7. 3, 4, and 6 and 7. And if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, just like the major scale, now I have to shift. I have to do a shift up to get the perfect fifth, the major 6, and now 6 and 7. Here's that minor 7 or dominant 7, and then my root. So there's 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I go a whole step down to the dominant 7, the major 6, and then it's just the same as a major scale. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So talking fingers, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 3, 4. Then we do a shift, 1, 3, 4, 1. 1, 4, 3, 1, 4, 3, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2, 1, 4, 2. So the dominant 7 scale, we now have a half step between 6 and 7. You've got to know the formula. Half step between 2 and 3 and 6 and 7. So that means that the 7 in our A7 bar chord, we can now look at it and count up to 7, and you will see your dominant 7. If I do this added 7 up here in the bar chord, this is type 2 bar chord, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's the dominant 7. Very bright, cheerful little chord. So 7's an important note, very, very important. When we play the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, well, that's got a quality of its own. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The dominant 7, to me, has a seriousness to it. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so pretty, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it's very serious to me. The 7, dominant or minor 7, is very serious. A wonderful interval. Going to do a lot of things with that 7, so we got to know where it is, right? So if I go back to my dominant 7 scale and I ask you, well, you should know where your roots are, of course. And you know where the 2s are. You know where the major 3rds are. A half step to the perfect 4ths. You know where your perfect 5ths are. You know where the major 6 is. And now the minor 7. And we're back to root. This is a movable scale, just like your Form 2 major and your Form 2 minor. But we have to compare these scales. We have to see the difference. And the only difference in the dominant scale is we share the roots, we share the major seconds, we share the major 3rd to the major scale, we share the perfect 4th and 5th to all the scales, and the major 6, we share that with the major scale, but now we have this minor 7 or dominant 7. It's very important that you start putting that together and seeing that. So your major, your dominant 7 scale is movable. We move it up to started on the 8th fret, And you've got your... Sometimes it's good to practice your scales and actually target the 7. Stop on the 7. Kind of helps you to learn them sometimes. I could also signify the half steps. 6 and 7, 3 and 4, 6 and 7, down, up, picking. You got to learn it slow and you got to move it all around. When you play it like down in G, of course, the frets are wider and you have to compensate for that. But when you play it in G on the 15th fret, you got to compensate because everything's much closer, much tighter up here. But you need to play as well up down here as up here. It shouldn't make any difference. So you really have to, once you memorize these scale patterns, you can't keep playing them A. I always like you to learn them in the key of A, but then you got to start moving them around. And we're going to talk more and more about these scales and how to practice them and what to do with them. So now, by learning this dominant 7, we're able to figure out what the dominant 7 is when you see a chord that says A7 or B7 or G7 or E7. You could take any one of those notes, like say G7, and you could go, well, what's my 7? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Well, F is the 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is F. So if I take a G chord and I add an F to it, I have G7. The major scale, if I take the 7 from the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's the major 7. There's a G major 7 with F sharp on the top. If I want a G7, I move that finger down to F, and I have my G7. So we start to talk intervals and chords. Root on the top of the G chord, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, G7. If I hit an open E, that would be a G6. If I add my baby finger and play up to my baby finger, that would be just a 5th. D is a 5. And if I go from 5 down to C, that's a 4th. So that we call that a G sus. G sus 4. 4. 3. If I add, let's say, an A, that's a 2. We would refer to that as a 9 usually. So learning your intervals and learning about scales and arpeggio helps us to understand every chord we play. It makes sense. So that when you play with keyboard players or organ players or other guitar players or other musicians that know their music theory, you'll be able to talk their language with them, the language of intervals. And the trilogy, chord, scale, arpeggio, those 3 go together. And when you understand them, then you're able to speak the language of music and learn the language of music. And it's very, very wonderful. It's great. Your playing will be better, your understanding's better, your songwriting, your ear, you can figure out songs just by hearing it. You're walking in the store somewhere, or you hear that music being pumped at you and you go, wow, oh, that sounds like minor. Oh, yeah, it's sad. And you're probably right. Oh, that's real happy, giddy, go, you know. Well, it's probably major, right? Dominant, serious sound. Maybe it's a dominant chord they're playing. Sounds like it. And a lot of times you're going to start to be right. You're going to hear things and be able to relate. Later on, you'll get diminished and augmented chords that really sound crazy, okay? You know, you're going to have an augmented chord, you know. Sounds kind spooky. And then diminished chords. Ooh. They sound kind of weird. So they have uses, and they're in songs by the thousands. So I can't stress to you how important scales are. And it's just, you're going to be glad you learn this stuff. And take your time. Everyone learns at a different pace. And we have complex lives sometimes, and we don't have time to practice all the time, but we try to do our best we can to be consistent. And always working on the right things and not just playing around dibble-dabble, and you can do that forever and go nowhere. But if you get down to studying and trying to understand, you will do well, and it will start to get easier and easier. It's just like when you were a little kid and you learned to read words and your ABCs, and then eventually words and stuff. After a while, it got easy, and you got better and better as the year went by. Same thing with music. You're learning a language that's so important, the greatest of all the arts, because later you'll be able to, we'll look at the coloration of chords and intervals and scales. And in that way, you're going to be able to paint with your music. Yeah, how great's that? All right, well, we did the dominant today. We call it a dominant 7 scale. You could call it a minor 7 scale. That wouldn't be wrong either, okay? But we have to realize the minor 7 or dominant 7 is a flatted, lowered by a half step from the major 7. Lowered down in pitch, 1/2 step, we get the dominant 7 or minor 7. So, I hope your practice routine's going well, and hopefully this is starting to make sense to you, and you're having fun. You can make scales fun. It's a challenge. Every day, on your worst day, you don't feel good, you had a fever, who knows what you got, but you play beautiful scales. That's where you want to be. You can play them anytime, day or night. Play pristine, beautiful scales, and you're on your way to becoming a great musician, a great guitar player. Okay, keep practicing. Be diligent. Be consistent.